through from the early days until 2005, when he sadly passed away from a brain tumor. His story is just unique in Irish sculpture history, and that's what we're going to try and get through to you today in terms of pictures, prints of his available. There's a maquette or two over there in the far room. And do I need the mic?
Yes.
Yes. Tony, Baltic, I might need to use the mic, so is that okay?
A bit more, please.
A bit more? Oh.
I do that.
And Carol gave you the outline of Fred's life and times. He was a very varied artist, doing all kinds of work, drawing, prints, representation of stone, bronze and wood, and he became a professional sculptor when the opportunity came to do so after 1989. And his background is fascinating because any of you who know West Sligo, the road from Sligo to Ballina, at the village of Easky, you bear right down to Killeen-Duff. The village of Drummer West, you take the right fork down to Easky and the townland of Killeen-Duff, not far from the seashore. The geology has shaped and the mythology has shaped anybody who grew up in that countryside. On the top right there we have the Split Rock, which is only a couple of fields away from Fred's front door. And the Split Rock, you know how it was split. Fionn McCool was just his mates up on the top of the hill, and they had a pitch and toss game to see who could throw a stone the farthest and who could throw a stone as far as the sea. But Finn's stone landed about a mile short of the seashore, and he was so annoyed he hit the stone with a wallop with his cane and it split in two. That's how you get the Split Rock. And there are stories about you have to be an honest person to get through that Split Rock. Equally, Mick McHugh and Jack Hart here rambled the countryside with Fred as far as what we call the Giant's Griddle. Sligo has 12 portal dolmens. We have 70, about 1/7 of all the megalithic tombs of Ireland and County Sligo, and Fred was very aware of that kind of background growing up. Jack, you had rambles up as far as the Split Rock in your time, so I'm going to call on Jack very soon. Because the house next door to Fred was that of the blacksmith, and the corner was called the forward corner. And on that forward corner, on the wall, there's a plaque. Now Fred got friendly with Jack and his family, and we'll talk later on about how he used the image of Jack's father to make the gawa, Driachtan Gawa, down in the town park in Tralee. There's a plaque on the wall there which is quite unique in Ireland, I would say, because you have Fred's family, Jack and his family, and the MacDonagh family. Some of you have heard of Martin MacDonagh, the playwright, Beauty Queen of Lenan and such plays. They're all related. They all came from that townland of Killeen-Duff. And it was the name of Fred's old family home, and he had the vision to sort of buy the home from his siblings, do it up. Jack was going to do likewise at the house next door, and they would retire to heaven on earth as Killeen-Duff. Wasn't to be, because Fred had done up the house and he died shortly after it, 2005. His sculptures can be seen in 12 Irish counties, in India and Japan, and I'll be focusing in on a lot of those through the talk. So from himself sitting in royal splendour at Bunratty. Have you seen Bunratty? We'll come back to it again, but it's just a huge piece opposite Bunratty Castle, one of the biggest pieces of all. It all begins with the story of an ashtray. So he had a unique talent from his primary school days. When he was 12 and 13, he creates himself a little industry, all built around an ashtray. Now Jack, can you illuminate further on the story of the ashtray?
Well, my connection with Fred is something that...
Mike, okay. Come over here maybe. Tread carefully there. I'm going to say tread softly, but...
Is that okay?
Yeah.
My connection with Fred is that we're cousins. We were born in two houses on the side of the road in Killeen-Duff, as Martin said, just outside Eastkey village. We grew up together. We were friends right through our lives until Fred died in 2005. And when he died in 2005, I was, like everybody else, totally frustrated at the idea that somebody would die at this age when he was at the peak of his powers, really. Now, he had done an awful lot of stuff with Martin shown, and I wanted to, you know, in some way get across the magnitude of his creations and his contribution to art. Now, public sculpture, the statues you see around the place, they're the most important artifacts in the country, in any country. But yet, people, even though thousands pass them every day, look at them every day, very little is known of the sculptors, the people who create them. So I wrote a book shortly after Fred's death called Unraveling the Spiral, which is a biography of him, a study of his work, but more importantly is all these photographs of his pieces and where they are and what they meant and who commissioned them, etc., 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 so that somebody would have a complete picture of Fred, his work, for the future. So that's our background. We were born in Killyduff. The story of this, and this is, you know, the tiniest spark can create the greatest fire. I was down on holidays because my family had left. My father was a blacksmith, and we had left to go down to the Midlands. He was working with on the bogs with Portnamona. And then I used to go back every summer on holidays. And we were in the local shop in Eastquay, and I was looking for postcards. I loved local postcards of Sligo. I was rooting through to see was there any new ones. And in the meantime, Fred rambled over to the counter, and he was looking at souvenirs, you know, standard souvenir. And he took one up and he said to the girl behind, the woman behind the counter, he says, that's not very good. He says, I could do better than that. And she says, what are you talking about? And he says, look, you know, it's not very good, is it? And she says, it's perfectly okay, like, I mean, what's wrong with it? I know, it's not nice. And she says, could you do better? He says, I could. And she says, you're on. Now, he didn't know, but her name was Eileen Mary Hart, no relation, by the way. And she did, she had a sideline going in creating these souvenirs. And she came back the next day, by arrangement, and she had a tray of stuff for him. What is it?
Plasticine.
Basic clay anyway. She said, right, see what you can do. So we went off out, and he said, I'll make a thatched cottage. And across the road from us was a thatched cottage, and started making the cottage. And then he saw it and he says, like, not very interesting, is it? And I says, oh, it's grand, it's terrific. And he says, no, I make an ashtray. So he included the garden of the house and the gate so that you had a place to put your cigarette. So it became an ashtray. So the next day he brought it back to her, and she said, wow, that's terrific. That really is good, you know. And she said, could you paint it? And Fred said, yeah, of course I could. So she said, okay, come back tomorrow and I'll give you something to paint. So next day we came back and she had about 12 of these models. And of course, this was magic to us. We'd never heard of this kind of thing, you know. So she had, you know, done the clay model, or the clay model of whatever it was, and reproduced them in whatever it is, plaster of Paris. So she said, okay, go off and paint these now. So he went off, took the tray of 12 or so, and painted them up the way they were, and that was the end product. When he came back, she said, that's fantastic. She said, now I'm going to sell them, and I'm going to give you 50% of all the money I earn. So you know, we didn't even know what money was in those days, and it might have any. Sorry?
What age was he at this age?
He was about 13, 14.
Yeah.
He was just about 13, 14. So that's how he started. Now, I'll skip just a little bit forward because, just to explain, about 5 years later, Fred was at a loose end. He had finished he went to the vocational school, did his group search, stayed on for another year, I think, and at this stage he was pretty well ready to go to England like everybody else. But Eileen Mary Hart went to the principal of the school, who happened to be a fellow called Mr. McHugh, Joe McHugh, and if Michael is somewhere, Michael's father actually. And Eileen Mary said to him, like, look, this fellow is enormously talented, we can't just let him go. And Joe McHugh said, yeah, you're dead right, you know. And she says, come on, why don't we go down to the VEC, get them to establish a scholarship to send them to the College of Art in Dublin. This is a guy who had just about done his group search, you know. So anyway, they started the campaign, got samples of his work, went down, convinced the VEC to set up a scholarship specially for him to go to the College of Art. And in 1961, he went to the College of Art, and the rest is history.
We're actually coming again, that's what I said, it's a team effort today. And so from East Key Vocational School, the principal was Mr. McHugh, Michael's father, and it was the first student ever, I think, in Ireland to go from a VEC system to the College of Art in Dublin. And of course, the professor at the College of Art was Donald Murdoch. And look up Donald Murdoch online, and he kind of comes directly from the 1916 Cultural Revolution, really, and with all the people he had connections with. And he was to be really influential in Fred's life and times. You can see the picture of the student unrest, like Fred did his degrees, and qualified. Or Murdoch, I have to read what Murdoch said about him. And he said that, I should ask Gael again. Tá aine gom Anton F. ó Conlon mar Maclean san Ryan Delvathorta an seo le breis le cúig bliana. Le linn dom bheith I gceannas na rinne seo. Níor tháinig fé a chúram Maclean cho meabhrach, cho dígrasach, cho ábalta leis. Agus sé a bharúil láidir go bhfuil fé na halína thar an codíontacht am. Tá spéis leithige in Alín na Weimsere, rud is sa léir ó saithir a chud daltaí ó thosaigh sé féinnig teagasc. Tá lí ige freisin le Alín rúchasach na héireann, agus tá buinteige le gnóthaí cultúra eile mar chun na Gaeilge, an réalt, an pláiscadal, Coislife, agus tugann sé saoil na halína isteach san agras seo. Now, there couldn't be higher praise from a professor at the time, Donald Murdoch and Fred Conlon. And you remember the pláiscadal Coislife, Sean O'Thoma on the radio. Seemingly, Fred and Jack figured out that the chocolate biscuits were better at the rail than anywhere else. So that was one reason why they went to the rail. But he travelled this square here, and Rathmines, and all the places around Dublin. And O'Murroch had a piece of the Lusitania Memorial from Cove, done by Jerome Connor, in the studio in Percy Place. So Fred did most of the restoration on that Lusitania, the angel of the Lusitania. Some of you might be familiar with the Lusitania, just on the square there at Cove. You familiar with it, some of you? And right across the way by the water's edge you have Sonia O'Sullivan in bronze. So Percy Place was a studio where that was done in Dublin. So then he gets interested in the classical mode and stuff. They breed a wood carving during his College of Art days, and the relief panel, which is now I think in the School for the Blind, and Saura in wood. So he's carving using materials, all sorts of materials on the highest order, and then bronze. His biggest works are to be in bronze and stone. beautiful piece called Such Repose. And there are models of some of these available. The model is the maquette, and there's some of them for sale still today. Family group, extended family, Renaissance influence. So he travelled. O'Murrough had fantastic lecturers coming into the College of Art at the time, and that has its mark on the work in the National Gallery today. Pieta piece, beautiful piece in itself. Mick, have you got that piece of carving there? So Mick has a piece that Fred made for the family, just presented to Mick's family in Eastleigh, and we have it here today. He went down to Eastleigh especially to bring it up to us today. I'm going to pass it around.
Mother and child.
That's the mother and child.
Dated and all at the back.
It's dated here 1962.
When he was in college now. He was in the College of Art. I arrived one day with that piece.
Yes, when he was in the College of Art, he arrived at the McHugh family with this piece one day. So pass it around, just to see. Fantastic. And I saw a medieval carving from the 14th and 15th century, the armless Jesus. Christ has no body but yours, no hands, no feet, no earth but yours. That's from St. Teresa of Avila. And I might ask Kathleen to explain about the Station Mass in Scarden, Moore and Sligo in the early 70s. Kathleen Conlon.
Can you hear me? Probably better. It's just two or three sentences. When we arrived in Sligo and built the house, we were invited to have the Station Mass about the second year we were in the house. We had no crucifix, no emblems whatsoever of decency of the time. So anyway, the week before we had the Mass, Fred said, "It's all right, Kathleen, I'll sort something out." So he went out of the workshop, got a piece of, I think it was teak, and he carved the crucifix for the Station Mass. So I'm delighted that we still have it.
She's in more later on.
Yes.
Margaret, Kathleen, that's And then when the unrest happened at the College of Art, the college basically closed down. Fred was out of a job because when he qualified, he went to Navan for a year, and then O'Murrough invited him to become assistant professor at the College of Art, which he gladly took up. But with the unrest that was going on, the college had to close classes, and they closed down. So fortunately, you remember when the College of Art was just near the National Museum and the National Library, behind the National Library. The director, Bronson O'Riordan, of the Woodkey excavations by King Dublin, and George Ogan was excavating it now. They needed somebody who could draw objects. So Fred got a sort of part-time job for some months drawing objects from the Woodkey excavations and also from Naut itself. And with that, actually when he was in the College of Art, Jack charted very nicely about they went along to, Jack was going to some macroeconomics lecture, but Fred said, "Come on." He took him into lectures by François Henri. Now, François Henri had been to Inishkay Island, and she had published a lot of material on early medieval Ireland, and she was giving the lectures. So to have lectures from François Henri back in the 60s, you couldn't beat that. So he was influenced by her work, and he was drawing these pieces then from the Woodkey excavations. And also he got the gold medal for pictorial representation in his final exam at NCAD. So he didn't do an awful lot of watercolours. He did some, and he did some prints. We have a couple of them on display over on the tables here, for you to look at later on. And you can see his pictorial work, his self-portrait. We began the very first image with a self-portrait of Fred, and the very first slide, the second slide. Kathleen herself, a long time ago. Tell you how about that. Now this is the supper at a Mass. The actual print of that is available on the table over there, and Mother Earth. So he was thinking very, very deeply about all the medieval art he had seen, whether he was abroad or not. But they went to the continent quite a lot in the married days, but before that he had these very, very rich influences. You couldn't like that really. The visitation in stained glass. And then his very, very first public commission was 1967 at Park and Ossig, Dangly Cush. And you can remember that was 50 years after the death of Thomas House. And De Valera was down that time at Park and Ossig, and there are a couple of articles that have been written about that in the Dingle Lower. So that was Fred's first commission. It's on the way into Park and Ossig, and you need to see it sort of at 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening to get the nice light on it. The morning light, comes from the east, so you don't see it in the same splendour as you do. Look at the detail of that, of Fred in 1967. Genius. And I put in just a couple of slides of Park and Ossig, where Donald Lynch and all the Lynches brought glory to the Piercing many moons ago. But I put in that slide of the picture itself because Fred played for the Sligo minor team, and he stopped playing, didn't go to the senior ranks because he wanted to protect his hands. That was the main reason for Chaplin. So he was a fair footballer, and he fished and did the mountain work and turf cutting and all the activity of a rural existence, which was hard work, like. And then I've looked at all his work, and on the listings that a great friend Anita Quilligan Watts did, the listings of all the pieces here, over 46 pieces of art through the decades, from the 70s, 80s, 90s into the 2000s, and out of the 46 pieces, 23 are named as Gaeilge. And he had a real interest in the language himself, even though there wouldn't have been any native Irish speakers in Eastleigh or Killeen but because he was in the Dublin milieu with Unrail, the Clash Cattle and all the influences of Conlon Gaeilge, he did enter the Oireachtas art competition and won first prize on several occasions. So these are pieces that will be entered for the Oireachtas art competition, and then sometimes the small maquette becomes a real piece of bronze because a commission gets done and it becomes a huge piece of work afterwards. This was in Marley Park in Dublin, probably in granite, now missing. Nobody has it in their backyard, have they? But that's the only piece that we think is missing. So that was Fred in 1983. He always had a fag as well. Casa na Galí. So he was really immersed in the whole idea of what the prehistoric people did. They figured out about sun, moon, relationships, the seasons, the coming and going of light, and this is what he focused on, and an awful lot of his work on the moon, and Sligo, Casa na Galí, Tobergal. He delves into the spiral, and there's lovely descriptions of Fran Jack's book about the whole influence of the prehistoric spiral, negative, positive energy flowing back and forth. It's a big part of his life. Aver Alban in granite for Shekinah Garden Centre. That was done at a symposium. So the whole concept of working in symposia was developed in the 60s and 70s and 80s, where a group of sculptors, 10, 12, 14 sculptors, would be supported by the Arts Council, the county councils and the powers that be, to work in a space and create individual pieces. And working together was a great collaborative thing. And there's one actually happening as we speak. We'll say more about that at the end. So he worked on symposia in Scotland, in Ireland, Sligo, India and Japan. And again, this beautiful piece here on Scottish granite. And look who sits on that seat. William's here today. Vinnie Conway, some of you might have known Vinnie. He was just our time and Pat's, and our condolences to William. He died just on the 17th of September last. He's sitting very happily in that Aver Scottish granite. And Kathleen, you might say a little bit about Catherine McCann, because every artist needs a patron, and Catherine McCann has been one of the great patrons of Fred and his work. Just a couple of sentences.
If you could hear me without the mic. Okay. Catherine has this garden down outside Glenmalure in Wicklow. Up here, sorry, thank you. Outside Glenmalure, and for a number of years she opened the garden to the public, and she termed it a spiritual garden, and she invested in quite a number of sculptures, from different sculptures around the country really, but she actually purchased 3 pieces of Fred's work, and finally she had an open celebration in about 7 or 8 years ago, and Michael T. Higgins did the honours, and at that opening, the piece that you saw there about Cousin the Galley, that is now part and parcel of the Wicklow Way and was purchased by Wicklow County Council to celebrate Fred's work.
So Shekinah Gardens open to the state, well worth a visit in Glenmalure, and of course Rathdrum you might be talking about soon as well. Huge impact on these pieces. The philosophy which underlines my work is based on change, continuity, and the search for measures in natural order. This was some of Fred's. He would always make an artist statement with all the pieces he made, and that was like a listing and a great gathering that Anita did of his work, because only for that she got Fred to give her what he thought of each sculpture, and they're the words that appeared in the catalogue then. Imagine if this became a reality for Dublin Airport. This was submitted for the competition to be at the entrance to Dublin Airport, the spiral, which he had been consumed with really for many years previous. This is 1989. Like he went to work, he left Dublin, started the art department in Sligo in 1972. In 1989, this is a very symbolic and significant year, because this is the year that he was able to retire early and become a full-time sculptor. And he was disappointed, I suppose, majorly disappointed that this didn't become a reality. Because if you were driving into Dublin Airport and look at something like this, 14 foot high, 15 foot high, wouldn't it be incredible? Because it's changing all the time. Every time you look at a piece of art that's based on a spiral, it's never the same angle. But it became, this was the maquette far end, so Kathleen has this did. And there he is. He worked with engineers to make this piece a reality. And where, as I said, the spiral came from, first of all, Newgrange, and the triple spiral at Newgrange, the Castle Strange stone he talked a lot about, and then the Iron Age shield, and it continues down to the lectures he would have seen from Francois Henri, Inishke on the right hand side, and the stone at Riask in West Kerry. These are all published by a lot of people back over the last century, and the stone at Riask is probably the most complete of all the early Christian monuments, so the one who knows it well. The Donald Lynch comes from the town end of Kilfountain, and Kilfountain has its own beautifully carved stone with a cross and spiral on it. We have good pictures of that. That'll be the next slide show. And then he is delving back into, well, some of the commissions are given by County Council, development bodies, the Partholonians, the commemoration of Ballyshannon, and he gets across the argument between Partholon and the wife Partholonia. He'd been out hunting all day. He was away hunting for days, and she was very suspicious about where he was. And there was a big argument when he came home. This is all in the mythology of Ballyshannon. And in Wahoo, one of his favourite pieces at Kilshimach, the Tuatha De Danann forces are beginning to sink into the ground. And here she is, Ineen Wahoo is sinking into her descent into the underworld. He presented Jack with this piece, Torgeish. One is one of the few. Which? The drawing of Torgeish is one of the few instances where Mael Hochlan defeats the Norseman. Torgeish drowns his rival in Loch Owd in County Westmeath. So this is Fred's image of the drawing of Torgeish. There are very few instances of where it's recorded that the Irish do battle and win the battle over the Vikings. This is one instance. One of the big collaborations was at Hazelwood in 1985-87. Hazelwood House today is restored, and it's a fantastic story of conservation. I was out there recently, and I was shown with a very small group of people. There are 20,000 barrels of whiskey in the stores at Hazelwood. They have now a distillery, but it was the home of the Wynn family, and the Creech have control of most of the woodlands. So in 1985-87 there was a fantastic Mihal symposium. 14 wood sculptures were carved at that time at Hazelwood. Fred's piece was Sush Leave on Da Ain, and right across the lake of Lochgill, on the southern side of Lochgill, there's Sliabh Dá Éin. So he created this piece on a plinth with the two birds back to back and resting chairs as well. So you could contemplate the lake as you looked across, and you looked across the mountain, Sliabh Dá Éin. This is Fred's piece. And of course, the timbers got vandalized or weatherized in the 1980s, but recently we've got some money through Creative Ireland for a few of the pieces to be redone, and that's happening as we speak. So this was his image of Sliabh Dá Éin, beautiful piece of work. And this picture I took this day week of Finn Conlon, who is here with us today. Finn is carving. Finn has become a professional sculptor, son of Fred's, Kathleen's, and best of luck, Finn, and congrats on your work today. So you're the first place to see this image. He's putting his nose down. This is his little model for the two birds. Nobody else has seen this yet. I only took this day week. So it hasn't been in any newspaper, so you saw something quite unique this morning. And then as the 80s moved on, Jack comes back into the fray again with the mother and child at Lucan. Aontas. I think it's my own favourite piece of all of Fred's work. He captures the sense of trust and bond and affection between mother and child. It's in granite, and for it to be sitting in a community college, a thing that would have cost thousands in its day. How did that happen, Jack? Jack didn't have that thousands to spend in the college kitty, I'm sure, but he might just tell us very quickly. You want to say something about Aontas, because he does another great collaboration as well with Jack's College for the Millennium.
It was when the mid-90s, I think it was, and Fred called into me in Dublin, and we were going over the woes of the world, and he said, "Oh, there's nothing going on, no commissions, no nothing." And I said, "And have you any pieces to sell?" He says, "Yeah, but nobody is interested in buying them." And I said, "What have you got?" And he took out a portfolio, and he started going through it, and he came to this photograph of that. I says, "Hold on a second," he says, "what size is that?" And he says, "Life size, it's in granite." And I says, "Where is it?" He says, "It's lying up in Paddy Rose quarry up in the mountain." And I says, "What's it doing up there? It's beautiful, And he says, "No, it was commissioned, but whoever commissioned it ran out of money. This was times when money was scarce." And I says, "And how much do you want for it?" And he says, "I'll make it out what the balance is, and if you want it, yeah." So he worked out what the balance was, and I started a campaign, a fundraising campaign. In other words, I was principal of the school, and I put a squeeze on everybody who did business with the school. I want an ad for this little brochure. So I raised the money for the piece of sculpture, got it installed, and absolutely beautiful. Paddy Rowe, who owned the quarry, came to locate it, and he came before Fred kind of arrived, and I said, "There, Paddy, that's where I want it, right in the centre of a lovely big lawn." Paddy said, "Right, sure, Fred isn't here, but I'll get going on it, So he put down the whatever stuff he was sticking it with. So he put down the sculpture. The next thing, Fred came in, and he went berserk. He says, "What are you doing?" He says, I'm putting up your sculpture here. This is where Jack wants it." He said, "I don't give a shit what Jack wants." He said, "It's facing the wrong way." And Paddy says, "Why?" And he says, "Where's the sun?" He says, "It should be facing the opposite way, kind of that way instead of that way." So poor old Paddy had to get it up again before the glue stuck and refaced it, So it's been there ever since. The kids just love it, and it has become an emblem of the school and a very suitable piece to inspire school and everything school goes with.
Certainly. So we're moving on to the decades in the 1990s begin with him rambling off to India and Japan, more sculpture, and one line he has, "My work has been in conjunction with the spiral." That's his own word. "I want to travel the edge of the spiral." And then to the end of his life he says, "This is the second dance of the spiral. It may not be where I have travelled before. This is my journey now." That was a statement towards the end of his life, but it really goes back to the whole thing of the spiral, influence of the spiral on his work. He's working with people in India, and again at Shekinah Garden, the sculpture garden, Ní Mara Hilter Beater, piece from Catherine McCann's collection. Light and play and geometrical figures are all figured here. Solus Inter Sculpture Symposium in Nano City in Japan. They love it out there in Japan because they knew as much about the sun as people in Newgrange did. And that's still to be seen today. And this is in granite, but at night time, I think there's it's in the book, there's a light that comes through from the base upwards to the top, and it takes on a different shape at night. And I can only do a selection of slides for all his work. And Gulbarga was another one in India, made of basalt. He's working with shapes all the time, granite and bronze. And again, going back to the Oireachtas competitions, he doesn't forget them. He's gone out to Dublin for a long time, but he's still winning Oireachtas prizes. The Waterford Crystal Oireachtas Award 1996, basalt and limestone. It's got an emphasis on triangles and squares and circles and the wonder of the sky. Three from the Spera. Even for something as regular as a fire station in Strokestown, he's using the images of the hose and the ladder on a limestone piece of work there. But in 1991, one of his biggest commissions of all was that of Parnell at Rathdrum in Wicklow. It's a piece in bronze. See there, he's figured out the stance of Parnell. And the people in Rathdrum, you can imagine, love it. There was a great unveiling with President Robinson at the time, and that was to be followed in 1998. The people of Rathdrum were so pleased with this, they invited him back to do another work in 1998 to commemorate 1798 at Rathdrum. So these are the maquettes from his piece of Parnell and Dieth. They're only 12-14 inches high. One of the he submitted for Sligo, and would have loved to have got the commission to make that into a real life-size piece. Another piece was chosen. The jury was out always, and who was right. It was a pity Fred didn't get that commission for Sligo. Dennis Desmond encouraged him to do a piece which would be a commission for the financial services, the bear, the bull and the stag. So this is the maquette for the stag. Again, that didn't become a huge reality either, but because artists have to submit commissions and to submit applications all the time, and they can't be successful at everything. The ones he was successful at were enormous. One of his biggest pieces in limestone is at Bunratty Castle. It's an aerial shot, captures the sheer size of the piece. It's really based on the collar of gold, the gorget, gold gorget, and the inspiration from that comes from the Mohon find of gold in 1854 during the laying of the West Clare Railway, influenced Fred at creating Cashel. This was the biggest gold find, something like 164 pieces that were found in that gold find. A lot of them were auctioned and sold off in the early days, but some still survive. And to make a piece based on that gold hoard and to place it at Bunratty Castle, where the O'Briens of Thomond lived. So it's no wonder why he called it the Cashel of Thomond. And the piece was made in Feely's yard, and about 2 weeks ago we buried Barry Feely of Feely Stone of Boyle. And Barry Feely is very supportive of Fred and his colleagues. It is the biggest stoneworks in Northwest Ireland, and Barry was right there in the 80s supporting Fred and his colleagues. So the pieces were made in Feely's yard, and I was able to bring my whole class down there one day, sit them all into it. I had 19 students in that. That was my whole classroom. Taught 4 classes in 2 teacher school. I was there for 20 years. So I could run my own curriculum. I said, today we're going to Boyle. And there's Fred in all his splendour sitting in the Cashalour. Very proud of that one. And again, right up as far as County Antrim, a very, very simple altar and font. He kept it simple, so the emphasis on the rituals. And you're all familiar with this one. If you're not, you have driven past it hundreds of times on Portland Road. What did the children say, Kathleen, when he made that? Make us another one. Mister, can you make us another one? And I think it's being moved at the moment to a safer place, because of the expansion and houses and everything else at Portland Road. Yeah. And then right down to Tralee, the Shem Satira, right at the back of Shem Satira. The idea was to commemorate the work that was done, and of course Shem Satira were very good at tapping out the music to the Kerry slide and Kerry polka, and of course Fred immediately thought of the blacksmith tapping out the magic Drí of Clongawa, and that's what Jack's father was next door to Fred when he grew up, and that's why he used Jack's father's face as an image for the blacksmith in the Tralee town park. And back to O'Carroll, the harper, he did 4 or 5 pieces based on music. The people of Keju are so proud of the O'Carroll piece. I mean, if you haven't been to Keju, they have won the Tidy Towns competition, the national competition, many, many years ago, but it's still one of the tidiest villages in Ireland. And they have the international harp competition every year, and last year we had a Sligo girl winning the senior harp competition at Keju. The Fiddler of Dooney in Sligo town, 1988. I said to Fred, I want a piece of bronze to commemorate the Fiddler of Dooney. And so he wanted an image of a male fiddler, because that was the image of the fiddlers in the 60s. I gave him images of Sean Kane of the Chieftains. So he used Sean's body to create this piece. It's not an image of Sean's face, but it's kind of Sean's stance, strong stance of the fiddle player. And in the same year, Josie McDermott died in 1992. Josie was a composer, singer, musician, playwright, a genius. He was blind since he was about 18 years of age. And this year we commemorated his 100th anniversary. He was born in 1925. So I didn't need any permission from any family, because Josie had no close family. He had a first cousin somewhere in England. So I just got permission from the undertaker. And I rang Fred and I said, Fred, I have a job for you tonight. What is it? So I explained, would you make a death mask of Josie McDermott? So he made a death mask of Josie McDermott. And we're so lucky he did, because the people of Keju know that this is Josie McDermott. There's actually a memorial to Josie in the town of Ballyfarnham, and everybody says, sure, that's not Josie, that's Paddy Duggan. It's a fact. But we were commemorating his 100th anniversary of his birth this year. And I knew that Josie was a special person then, and he is still regarded today in the same light. This is a bronze, again, for a big commission. I think Elaine knows something about that one. But that didn't become a reality, but it's still a beautiful piece of work. In the Morrison at Drumfin, James Morrison, the Sligo fiddle player, he wrote a tune called The Milestone of the Garden. So we took the milestone, and I said to Fred, how can we use this? And he came up with this design for the Morrison Memorial. And every year we have 20-30 musicians playing at 6 o'clock on a Saturday evening in the open air as a tribute to James Morrison. That's Fred here in 1996. There were 10 people in that picture, 7 of them are dead. You know, pictures are important sometimes. Fuin Scarf is a major piece, 14.5 foot high, or 15 maybe, for the commemorating the famine in Sligo. But again, Fred's imagination, and he used the phrase from Sean O'Riordan, Mar scarf fe hahan da rihe, ta manum all luba anocht. And when Maury Murphy, who was the editor of the Irish Family Curriculum for the state of New York, now that family curriculum is about 1,600 pages, she said that's going to be the frontispiece for the family curriculum for the state of New York. So that image was sent into all 3,000 schools in the state of New York, and it's there in the family graveyard in Sligo. That was her image of it that went into the family curriculum. That was a huge thing. So this is the maquette. Kathleen still has a few of these. So the maquettes are for sale always. The artist has a right to make 6 or 8 maquettes of the actual sculpture itself. So that's in bronze. So if you haven't spent all your lump sum, you could do worse than buying a little piece of bronze. And Cush Coon, this is for you, Jack. Where's Jack? Fred's grandson.
He's
down
here.
Somewhere. He lives in Boyle, so we'll have to put in Cush Coon, and the pieces are, just off centre because there's something ancient about them too. It's a beautiful piece by the harbour in Boyle. People don't talk about the harbour in Boyle, but of course the river, the Lough Garra River flows through Boyle because the Boyle River, and then it flows into into Lough Key. There's a lot of boating between Boyle and Lough Key, and that links into the Shannon as well. Again, Rathdrum and Sligo. We're coming close to the 2000 mark. St. Margaret of New Orleans. This is a piece in Carrigan Health Centre. She was a famous nurse. You can look her up online. She's a nurse that did Trojan work in America in the 19th century, and the people of Carrigan have her commemorated at the health centre because she was a nurse. The Millennium Sculpture, we're coming into the new millennium, and again he's playing with the columns and the fonts. And this is for Jack's Community College at Lucan. And Jack, we don't need to comment on that, I think, at the moment, because we're running. Just watch our time as well. A few bits to do. But the fonts of light is going to appear in a moment at Fuinchigal. Because here we are at 33 Parnell Square. And that's one of the reasons I said again at the beginning that we're here today, is that it was Michael's father who was the principal in Eastkey Tech in 1961, 60 or so, 61, that sent Fred to college. And Michael commissioned this piece from Fred here for the Conlon, the reconstruction of Parnell Square, this part of Parnell Square, and the final work that was done 25 years ago. So it's an inspirational piece. The fonts are fonts of knowledge. Granite columns are symbols of the INTO. The light represents the generations of teachers who have participated in the INTO. And then those words I've taken from Jack's book.
That's ours.
That's yours.
That's
Vic, do you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, well, maybe just to kind of say a few words, right? Excuse me, sorry. Yeah. This encounter is a bit like going down memory lane. When I go back to the beginning there, one of the first photographs we put up there was the split rock, right? And our primary school is beside the split rock, right? And the dare was, if you went through the split, it would close on the third time. And this was kind of part and parcel of growing up in Killinduff and in Ballymeany, which is the townland beside Killinduff. Other memories of the split rock, I don't know if anybody here remembers the yellow buses, the tour buses. A tour bus, now you have the Wild Atlantic Way now, right? In our days, we're growing up, we used to wait anxiously for a yellow bus, which was a tour bus, and the split rock used to be on the tour, and there was a pump beside it, right? And if we were lucky enough, Master Kelly would send us down to kind of look after the guests on the bus, who, generally speaking, would be American, and if you got sixpence from them, it was a great day out. Anyway, just to kind of moving on from there, Fred's family all went to Killinduff National School. John Kelly was the principal. I suppose Ireland, of a different time, no doubt about it. When you go back to, I suppose, even the Tech, and my father started the Tech in 47, when you think of all the graduates from the Tech, I went to the Tech myself, I did my group cert there, and then I was carted off to boarding school, which was a bit of an issue, but it all came full circle when I arrived here in Parnell Square. But yeah, when you think back in Ireland, back in the 60s and 70s, it was a tough time. The seasons were the seasons: spring, summer, autumn, winter. Sometimes you'd be looking for a dry cow. We didn't have, let's say, premier dairies or all that sort of thing. But they're the memories I grew up with, and they're still imprinted as they are with, I'm sure, with a lot of you, particularly anybody who came from the country. Anyway, just rolling it on, Fred's family, Nora's sister would have been in 6th class, I think, when I was in about 2nd or 3rd, and we used to kill each other to try and get Nora to do, to basically, she could just look at you, and that talent was in the Conlon family all along. So they were the kind of memories. And then as time moved on, Fred had left the primary school by the time I arrived. He obviously went to the Tech. The PCC floating around there at the moment, the mother and child. He was in the College of Art at that time, and I distinctly remember the day he arrived on his bicycle with the piece. My father was chuffed with it, right? And yeah, life moved on, and I was went off to boarding school, ended up in Pats. Was considering one down the other route, the woodwork teaching route, but the crack was so good in Pats, I couldn't I couldn't turn it down. Life was on. He's been 12, 13 years in the classroom. The credit union started, right? And the buildings here, we started the credit union here, and the buildings were in a pretty awful state. And as life moves on, we got an office. 33 came out for sale, and it was derelict, there was no roof on it. And the credit union was growing and growing and growing, and that wouldn't have happened unless the teachers had kind of come in behind it. We were heading towards the millennium, and the 33, I suppose, maybe was the first Georgian building in the square to really get what I would consider a first-class restoration job. After that, obviously you can see the impact of that here in the club and in IMTO, etc., right? So I think that's the story behind it. And then there was a space at the back, and I was looking at it, and I said, oh, it was just an empty space. And I was thinking back, and I said, I'll have a chat with Fred. And that's where Funchal came about. Bertie Herden opened the office, and Funchal was a big part of that. But I suppose personally for myself, when you look back at life, and I suppose most of us here are playing in the last quarter now as the relatives, but to join all the dots from your primary school to your days in the Tech, to teaching, to being involved here at Parnell Square, and to cap it all with, I suppose, maybe towards the end of Fred's life and the piece Funchal, you can see his thinking on it was just, he was out of this world in terms of a sculpture that you could kind of maybe engage with, have a chat with, and connect with. And I think maybe that was kind of what made it. Fred, at the end of his days, it was a tough exit, but he'd always be kind of a big part of, let's say, our family anyway, right, in one sense, right? Even reflecting on Martin, are we glad in Sligo that you decided not to go back to Kerry? And like in fairness to Martin, I just want to thank you just for, this has just been some engagement here this morning. I think it's just, sometimes you don't think of these. I suppose maybe when we're going through the various stages in life, we don't have time to think about this kind of stuff. And today was a day of reflection, and I think we were brought back into a world that we kind of had forgotten, right? In one sense, particularly in terms of our own mythology, and you can see how connected Frank was to our own history in terms of mythology and Fenmacote and all that.
That's what there's a word that Fred's own words there. He says, when I think of education, I think of fonts of knowledge. Knowledge gives us understanding and appreciation. And like all of Fred's work is simple but beautiful in the extreme. And to do it in granite and achieve it in granite, that's what's quite unique about his work. World class. This is a fantastic evocation of the life of Fred and Mick together, just the way you said it so well. Beautiful. A few pieces to go. Again, for community in South Dublin, Countess Markovich, Brendan Behan, Pigeon House, and Phil Innes. They're all 4 plaques on a wall it was done for South Dublin County Council, Clonard Road, 2003-04. His very last piece, again in 2004-2005. He managed this probably in the early stages of the tumour, and it's called Ray Namara. It got taken from its base, but the big news is it's going to be reinstalled at Ross's Point in 2025, maybe before Christmas sometime. That's a lovely bit of work to finish on. And I won't dwell on this too much because this is pretty garish. Fred compared the tumour in his brain to Balor of the Evil Eye, and Balor is going to be slain by his own grandchild Lou, and Lou drives the scar through Balor's head, through the eye. And Fred, he says well, there's another piece here on the installation, but he compared himself to the suffering of Balor in this way. So he couldn't just but think back on all that which had things that had made his life so rich. Even his gravestone has a little hole with the light coming through it, and there's a card by Eileen MacDonagh, equally one of Fred's most important and best students, and she's working today on one of the pieces at Hazelwood, and we're so fortunate that she's included in that. So as I said, his sculpture has appeared in 12 Irish counties, India and Japan, and this February we were marking the 20th anniversary of his death, so we had an exhibition in Sligo town by Fred and his son Finn. And I'm going to give the last few words to Finn. I think that's nearly the last slide. This is Finn's pieces of work, which are on display. Look up Legacy, the Hamilton Gallery in Sligo, and I couldn't have done this, as I said, without Frank's or without Jack's biography of Fred, with the help of Anita Quilligan, was for her meticulous recording of the work, and then the whole Conlon family, especially Kathleen. Finn Conlon.
No, I just want to say thank you to Martin and to the the teaching, the ITO and all of yourselves coming out today, just to support us, but also to continue the legacy of Fred Conlon. And I suppose I have gotten into sculpting, but I didn't intend to go into sculpting. This is something after my father had died, which in hindsight was pretty bad because I would have been able to acquire all his tools, but I had to go out and find my own path. But I think what I do remember is how he always instilled curiosity in the world around me, but also where we come from. So he was always enthralled with his background, his authenticity of who he was, and I feel that's something that I've been able to take on and to bring forward in my own work. And yes, I'm very fortunate that I'm part of the Hazelwood group of very skillful sculptors who were taught by my father, Fred Conlon. So you had Jackie McKenna, who has pieces of work outside Arnott's, or outside the Axe Insurance. You've got a small cough made out of bronze. You've also got the two ladies sitting outside Butcher's Walk, so that too is Jackie McKenna's. You've Eileen MacDonagh, who was described earlier, who's got amazing pieces outside Tala, who's got pieces outside the ESB, and you've got all these connections, and these connections have all been through the education and the curiosity that my dad instilled in them and in myself, but that wouldn't have happened without the connections of his own community and from the Hugh family and from the Hart family, and it's all stemmed back to that one encounter in a shop. So it's all about education, really. We all install this process and the stories. And
congratulations to yourself and your work, and keep it going.
And I'm here to continue it on, I suppose, in some shape or form. Thank you very much.
So, as I said, I couldn't have done this without Jack's magnificent biography of Fred. It was 2010 published. You can buy it in the shops, there's just a few copies over there. Kathleen has some of the prints, and there's an album, like a catalogue of all his work as well, on the table for you to peruse through after, before coffee. There's no rush away from here. I want to say thanks again to Conlon and the RTA and Kathleen said that word and Ty, of course. Yeah. I feel very much at home here because I sang for about 6 years with Sean Kramer's choir, the Avondale Singers, and their practices were always in this building. So I walked home to Town Street in good shape. Kathleen, which? Yeah, sure. The video installation. This is very big news from this year alone on the video installation Become.
Just to say that when Fred got ill, he needed some mechanism to give visual expression to what was happening inside in his head and in his body. And particularly when he could no longer use his two hands, he spoke to me, I really have to see what is happening to me. So that's where he came up with the idea of Valor of the Evil Eye. And he created this work with the help of two people who were his carers. They were carefully selected, and I have to give credit to the health board for this and to his GP, so that there were people who were interested in the arts. And he did this installation. He created that piece that you saw there, and he created another piece where it was all blue on one side and red on the other, because this is how he was feeling in his head. And as the time went on through his illness, he kept talking about that he could actually cope with his day. That his day was actually very good because of the people who were involved with him. The joy that they brought to him. And he wanted in some way to inform life about the impact of a brain tumor, but also to give credit to the people working in the area of the caring professions. So he decided on doing what we call a video installation, where he hired a filmmaker to come in and to make a film of his working on these artworks and being interviewed by the impact of the brain tumor. And that was made, and it was shown in the Modern Island in Sligo. And next week, the filmmaker and myself will go back to the RCSI here in Dublin. And that video installation is being taken on as part of the education process for the students, the medical students in RCSI. I want to share
The last part of Freddie, this is from Fred himself, during that period, he says, I feel like a bird with a broken wing. I am a burden. I wish I could get up and move, to do and be like that. Life has been thrown into chaos. Out of chaos, we have to create order. Fred Conlon.
Just to say, just to wrap it up, and maybe as a hook around Cloud and Munchori, I'll maybe finish where I should have started by welcoming you on behalf of the club to this really, really great occasion. I'm kind of a little bit. It's really keen, I suppose, wise, because it's kind of it's a very special occasion for me personally. Yeah, Fred was and will be a big part of my life, life's journey, right? I just hope that everybody here got a sense of Fred, and even there for the last couple of minutes, when you think of, I suppose, the way he challenged his condition, right? And I actually saw the video myself in Sligo, and yeah, it makes you think. But to have the bravery to do that is something that's just out of this world, I think, you know, right at the end of the day. I suppose even going back to how it all happened is really where it imprints on my mind. How himself and Mary Ellen Hart and McKevney, who was the CEO of Sligo VEC at the time, how they had the vision to, I suppose, take Fred on board and get him into the College of Art and Design. The alternative would have been a boat to England. That's where everybody was heading back in the 60s, 70s. As I know, let's say all of you who have country connections, you know what reality in Ireland was in those days. I suppose maybe another reflection I'd have when we look at our world today, a lot of the guys who went to the tech with me, they would all have been builders, right? Carpenters and plumbers, electricians, etc., right? And then maybe that particular model was overtaken by, I suppose, maybe academic education in terms of maybe the priority of the languages took over, and the skill sets that were being developed through the VECs at that time were, let's say, were pushed aside. Maybe that's coming back a little bit more now. And when we look at our own country at the moment, we need carpenters and plumbers and all that end of it, right? And there's a dearth of those there at the moment. And sometimes I think we need to reverse that trend. Like when you think of it, I went to the tech at 11, I was out at 13, I had my group set at 13, right? I could easily have gone on and I would have been a tradesman at 14, 15. A lot of the guys who were in the tech with me came to Dublin. They started that first building boom in the 70s. I think we need more of that now. If you look back on it, is anybody cracking this one, right? In one sense. But look, that's a little bit an aside from here, but there are lessons to be learned when we kind of look back, and maybe somebody needs to kind of bite the bullet and say, this is where we really need to go, like at the end of the day. But anyway, that's the story anyway. And look at, I just hope you all enjoyed the session.
Thanks to Jack and Cameron again. So, Cameron, is that it? No, that's it. Good night, Liv. See you again.